Welcome friends, it's Ray. Thank you so much for joining me today. In today's video, I feature cards I made using the June 2021 Hero Arts Monthly Card Kit. And this kit is awesome. It features everything birthday, including some cute kitties and some cute pups. If you missed the unboxing, I will have that linked below as well as at the end of the video. Now here I am actually taping my entire stamp kit to the door of my Misty and just using blue tape there to measure or really to mark where I want to tape the stamp set, and I'm just going to use some regular old packing tape, and then I'm going to be able to stamp all of the images at once onto a piece of 65-pound Nina white cardstock. Since the stamp set itself is 6 by 8, so I wanted to have my cardstock a little wider than the stamp set. Haha. So I cut my cardstock to 6 1/4 wide by 8 1/2, so that I could get the complete stamp set, which is 6 by 8, stamped. So I don't get the very top near the kitty stamped very well, but that's okay. I am actually not going to use those images in this video, so this should be fine. I am stamping that 3 times and had prepped my cardstock for heat embossing, so I used VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and then I'm going to use some clear embossing powder. My first card is a slimline card, and I'm going to start with just a little coloring, not much. Yay, I can handle this coloring. I'm not the best, but with these balloons, I wanted to show you that I'm just going to leave just a hint of white. And I'm using marker colors, alcohol marker colors that match some of the colors of the sprinkles that are in the kit. And so I'm leaving a hint of white to the right of all of the balloons, so that it makes it seem as though there's more shading than there actually is. It accents it a little bit more, makes it seem as though there's light there. So I'm going to speed up the rest of the coloring on the balloons. I'm not going to show you much coloring in this video because I'm just not the best, but I can handle these balloons. With the magic of YouTube, this is going to take just under a minute, although it took me much longer. So I will play just a hint of music here and come back in just a few. Now here I'm using an MFT, my favorite things, the Cloud Stencil and the Light Mint green ink cube that came in the kit, and just making some mint clouds all down my slimline card base or card panel. I rotated the stencil with each row of clouds, and here I am using my grid acetate to line up my sentiment, and I'm going to stamp this directly on the card panel. And I did make sure my inking was dried, so I sped up the inking with the heat tool before stamping my sentiment. I did use VersaFine Onyx Black ink and some clear embossing powder and emboss the sentiment. Here you can see that I am laying out my images and arranging them the way that I want and using some liquid adhesive to adhere them to my panel. I am using my acrylic block to help make sure that those adhere to the panel. And with the kitty, I actually die cut him 2 additional times on white cardstock and glued those together so that he has dimension. The rest of the images are flat. Here I've taken my 01 Micron pen, which has a very thin point, and have drawn lines from or string lines, balloon string lines, as if the kitty and then the cake and then the present were all coming or floating down from the sky to the party. Next, I'm using my jewel picker to place some of the sprinkles, trying to coordinate those to match the balloons, placing those on the panel. And I will use my Ranger Multi-Matte Medium, I always say that backwards, Multi-Medium Matte Glue to affix those to the panel. Next, I'm going to affix this panel to my card base using double-sided tape, and I actually cut my panel down before I started adding my images. And here I have waited to apply the lacquer that was in the kit, the glitter lacquer, and I'm going to apply that to each of the balloons. So I wanted to be finished with it before I applied it so that I didn't mess up my card, by putting my thumb in it. So that's what I'm doing here. And I really love the effects of this glitter lacquer. So pretty when it dries. So let me know in the comments what your favorite dog breed is. We're going to make some puppies in this video. My next card is a slimline card, and I had so much fun creating it. This image reminded me of a pug, so I thought I would try and create a pug. But the tail of a pug is curly. I'm using Post-it note paper to mask off the tail of the image, and am going to stamp that twice. So I've placed my Post-it note paper over the tail on the stamp and apply my ink, and then have to remember to remove that Post-it note paper before I stamp, and then that allows me to omit the tail when I stamp because there's no ink on it. Another tip, I won't heat emboss this like I normally do because I'm going to be using my Micron pen to finish the tail, and I want that black pen color to match the ink stamping. I'm going to use a pencil to draw in my tail, and I had to erase and start over. And then I'm using, instead of my Micron pen, looks like I used I believe that's a Tombow pen. It's the same point, it's a 01, and I believe we got that in a past Hero Arts kit. So I'm using that and have drawn in the tail of the doggy. I have also purchased the Ohuhu 36 color marker set in addition to my regular set. And this one is specifically for skin tones. I did a lot of practicing there and think I've got my pug looking like I want, so I'm going to color his birthday hat. I am going to use the coordinating die to cut out all of the doggy except the area where I have changed his tail. And so I'm doing some partial die cutting. Here I'm placing my top cutting plate just above where I actually um, augmented the tail. And then I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine and then come back and fussy cut the new tail and that area. I'm using the Streamer Stencil. It was an add-on for this month's kit. And I am using my grid line on my mat to apply some post-it note tape and then adding the stencil, taping it from the back, and use the post-it note tape so that I don't get any ink below that portion of my panel. So I have my ink palette over to the right and have applied some ink from the kit, the light mint, and am also using some sparkle shimmer sparkle texture paste. Wow, that's a mouthful. And this has some shimmer already in it, and I have mixed it with the ink on the palette to get a light mint color. And as you can see, I don't have enough to finish the panel, but that's okay. I wanted an ombre look anyway, and so I added more ink and more paste, mixed that together and got a slightly darker color. And so I'm coming in to finish off my panel here using my palette knife, and I'm going to then scrape off that excess, being careful not to get any on the bottom of my panel. And then we'll go ahead before I move further, take that off, and then I'm going to take that to the laundry sink and wipe off that panel or that stencil immediately, and my palette knife as well, and my palette. I took a scrap of cardstock and the mini ink cube from the kit and swiped that cardstock, or did a little ink swinking, as it's being called now, just to match. I wanted to do this for my sentiment so that I matched my ink color to my panel. I used my heat tool to dry that and placed that in my MISTI along with my sentiment, and we'll go ahead and stamp that in VersaFine Onyx Black ink and heat emboss it with clear embossing powder. So before applying the ink, I did prep with the anti-static powder bag so that I don't get ink where I don't want it. I'm using my dry paintbrush to remove excess embossing powder before I apply the heat. Here I'm trimming my panel down to 3.5 by 8.25. I have die cut or colored the cake from the kit and trimmed off the second layer and just using the top layer, and I've done that 2 additional times and affixed those together with glue to give some height to my cake. Here I've cut my sentiment strip down to 3/4 of an inch, and I'm placing my pug or placing the balloon to the back of the pug, and going to go ahead and use liquid adhesive to affix my cake to the panel, and then I will go ahead and use some 3D pop dots to pop up or add foam to the back of the dog and the balloon. And so what I would do in hindsight is actually cut 2 additional pieces or balloons and fix those together, and then only have to apply the foam dots to the back of the dog. I trimmed down my sentiment strip before affixing my card panel to my card base using double-sided tape. After my panel dried, the color consistency pretty much looks like one color and not the ombre effect that I thought I would get. But at any rate, it's sparkly, it's pretty, and I like it. And here I'm adding some of the green sprinkles from the kit to the panel just to accent. And I am calling this card done. Love the way it turned out. I made 2 additional cards with this kit, and I was going for a Dalmatian here, but I think that maybe on the first card, the slimline card, I made my spots a little too big. I love the puppies, but then I made a second card with smaller spots. But here I have started on a slimline panel for my Dalmatians and have die cut some hexagons, two the same size and then one larger one next size up for the middle. And I'm just placing these on my mat. The other question I'd like to ask is, what card theme do you tend to make the most? For me, it's Christmas and then birthdays second, but I never seem to have enough birthday cards. So I'm hoping that this year I can actually amass a collection of birthday cards so that I don't have to do many last minute ones. So here I am stamping some of the paw prints onto my panel and affixing some images that I have stamped and colored, or I should say colored and die cut off screen, off camera, placing those on to my panel with liquid glue. And in hindsight, wished I had not stamped my paw prints until after I got my sentiment on. But didn't think in that order this time. So when designing this card in my head, I wanted it to be a masculine card because I knew I wanted Dalmatians or black and white pups. And so when I colored my present and my cake and my birthday hat, I used blues. I wanted some toned down colors. I didn't want them too dark, but I wanted them toned down. So that is how I picked my color scheme. I used my Micron pen or marker to color the nose of this puppy in black because I had used my warm gray and wanted it to be consistent with the spots. I am going to stamp my sentiment onto black cardstock using Versamark ink and use my Brutus Monroe Alabaster White embossing powder. So after heat embossing my sentiment, I trim it down to about 3/4 of an inch and use liquid glue to place it onto the front panel. I used double-sided tape to place my panel onto a black mat, and I placed a little liquid glue behind the sides of the sentiment strip that are going to be placed on the black mat. Then I trim my sentiment strip down. Fix my sprinkles with medium matte glue. And that finishes off this card. Let me know if the spots on these pups are too big to be Dalmatians or make them Dalmatians. My fourth and final card is an A2 card, and I started out not even filming most of this, unfortunately, and actually got a spot of Nouveau Crystal drops in ebony. I think it's the color. I will look that up and be sure to link it. But I got a spot. I don't know how I did this, but I did. I had colored my little pups off camera. After getting that all fixed up, um, then I decided I wanted a little sparkle and shine, so I'm using the glitter lacquer pen from the kit and placing some glitter lacquer over the eyes of each pup and the bone that they're playing with. Now let's take a closer look at all of the cards I made in today's video using this kit. Those are my cards for this kit. I hope that they are inspirational and that if you like the video, you'll give me a thumbs up and subscribe if not already subscribed to my channel. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, good day, friends.